Hello, everybody. All right. So, if you haven't already, welcome to the Mikestand Weekend Edition, everybody. If you haven't already, if you can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That would be appreciated. Also, if anything here we talk about crosses your or catches your fancy, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and we will try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. All right, so as we wait to see if anybody else shows up, hey Rick, how'd your weekend go this weekend?
Pretty good, pretty good. Um, I might have somebody doing a Canadian Shield 3, uh, but that's not confirmed much, so I'm not going to say too much about that. Uh,
You mean doing art for you or?
yeah, yeah. Doing most likely the pencils and the inks.
Okay.
Okay, I just shared out, I hit like.
Yeah. Um, all right. Well, you want to give your intro here?
Well, I am, of course, Rick Piper of Cross Comics. I create comic books, and I'm not sure what else to say. I'll put in my link a little later for my YouTube channel. I do a YouTube show once a week. Um, who knows? In the new year, hopefully, well, once I get my own place, so I'm not sure when that'll be. I will be doing more than just my one show a week, hopefully.
All right. I'm just trying to. I see a couple people who are on Facebook right now, so I'm going to see if they'll drop in. I sent them the links earlier, of course, but yeah.
So, how's your weekend been, Mike?
All right, pretty more or less pretty relaxing. You know, I had Tim on the other night. We
Yeah,
were going
for
over Marvel, so
comics retrospect.
right. So yeah, we met some very interesting characters, and he actually had in the midst of his usual criticisms, he actually had some he actually had some nice things to say about some of the stuff we were going over. Like I know he seemed to like, albeit some people were making comparisons to Flexo the Rubber Man being just a red and yellow version of the Michelin Man. um, yeah,
Or is the Michelin Man just a white version of the the Rubber Man? Because I don't think Michelin would have been around then, let alone their
maybe
mascot.
maybe not. But yeah. So yeah, we went over. Of course, as you know, we started our January 1940 coverage, and we were focusing on Marvel, what was known back then as Timely. So we, of course, went over Mystic Comics #1, read Flex. Well, of course, I initially talked a little bit about, read off some notes on the comic itself, then did some character bios, some quick kind of,
Yeah,
Flexo the Rubber Man, who was apparently more recently retconned to being Earth's first symbiote. Um, then Blue Blaze, Dynamic Man, and Marvex, the super robot. And then, of course, we
sounds
read those stories plus Namor. So,
Sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm. So we were reading from Mystic Comics Volume 1, Volume 1, Issue 1, Daring Mystery Comics Volume 1, Issue 3, and Marvel Mystery Comics Volume 1, Issue 5. This Friday, of course, I have
You
you
have
on.
me.
Yeah. We'll be going over Archie, the books that came out from Archie Comics, of course, back then known as MLJ Enterprises. Um,
Cool.
so we'll
Any
of course be introducing everybody to Zip Comics #1, but we might even read the Shield as well.
cool.
Because as I told you last week, what I decided to start doing, starting with this past week, was if we're doing pre-script or pro-script for a year. In other words, we're introducing or coming out of a year's coverage. Then, or if we're introducing a new character or new characters, then we might extend the show to 2.5 hours. If we're introducing a new book, like we did this last Friday with Mystic Comics, then we'll extend it to 3 hours because just get as much of the information as we can get in.
Yeah.
So. And we have a lot of intros in January here. I would talk
Yeah.
about. Again, I haven't decided what specifically we're going to read yet. I stuff to look over this stuff, but that's for me. Let's see. Yesterday, watched eventually watched the Saturday morning cartoon block from MeTV that I pre-record and then watch, and then got caught up on some wrestling stuff, watching some of the stuff for, some of the matches from Impact. And then eventually got around to finally setting the shows up for this week.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Yeah. I've been watching a bunch of reaction videos to older and newer movies. Ones that I've watched or whatever.
mhm.
People watching these movies or whatever for the first time. So, that's always nice and interesting to
Yeah.
see how
Yeah.
other
And,
people.
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, it's neat to see how people who haven't seen these things view them, for the first time.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
I think it gives you a little bit of insight into
Mhm.
maybe quote unquote normies. Hey, Mr. Yanafui, how are you?
Mr. Yanafui is here. Huh? Hey, Mr. Yanafui. As always, if you haven't already, if you can like and share this, and see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. Also, anything, anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment or ask questions. Hi, Mr. Yanafui.
He's got a thinking face there for the one, and then he just says hi back, I believe.
So, just going
So,
in
what's up
here.
with you, Mr. Yanafui? Anything new and interesting or not so interesting?
Join me. I'm just right now just trying to check some stuff here. Because again, right now we're kind of in a point of the year where there's not a whole lot of news
Stuff
items
going
coming out.
on? Yeah,
Yeah, and he's saying not much either. Yeah,
yeah.
in fact, on Tuesday, I think, I probably mentioned that. Yeah, I mentioned that to you when I visited Chris and Diana's stream there um, after my show, um, where 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 I decided to do a kind of a little retrospect on Hal Smith's voice acting career. And for those who may not remember, Hal Smith, of course, among many of his roles, one of the ones he was probably most famous for is providing the voice of Santa Claus in a number of Christmas specials, particularly those that were produced by Hanna-Barbera. I distinctly remember he was Santa Claus and Otto the Chef in Yogi's First Christmas. So, my all-time favorite. So,
Cool. I'm not
anyways,
sure what my all-time favorite Christmas show is. I guess it depends on how you think about it. Probably as a kid, it probably would have been some cartoon or claymation type thing, stop motion, I guess they might call it. I know. I like at one point I'm really fond of one of the Christmas carols. I know it's a black and white one. Probably more one of the more famous actors to do it. I just forget his name. I think it's his name, and I'm pretty sure it's wrong, as Alistair Smythe, but I'm pretty sure that's just some Spider-Man villain. My cousin saying Alistair something. So
It's right on the tip of my tongue.
here, let me see whether I can look it up while we're talking about whatever.
I'm just trying to see. There were a couple of things we went over outside of that one I was just telling you about. Basically, many of the comic book pros doubling down, to counter Comic Palace's claim that the industry is dying. That was one of the things I went over this last week. Yeah. Oh.
Adaptions of I know.
Google who played the original Scrooge.
Yeah, I don't think that was the original one, Anita.
Huh?
I don't think that was the original one.
Which one?
The one that we're talking about. I think there was one before it.
Black and white one.
Yeah, I think was 2 or 3 black and white ones. But I could be wrong. It's
Yogi's First Christmas is my all-time favorite Christmas special, but I also like Santa and the Three Bears from 1971, and some of the other Hanna-Barbera Christmas specials as well. Like a lot of the Flintstones, like Flintstones Christmas, Flintstones Christmas Carol, and as you were mentioning, Christmas Carol has been adapted a number of times over the years.
yeah. But the one that I'm thinking of, his name is I believe Alistair Sim.
Yeah.
So Smythe, Smith, Sim, very similar.
Yeah.
See, it's easy. I can see how I got confused with it. Um, let's see. How many times has Christmas Carol? A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens made
There he is. Hey, Metal.
Action.
Hello.
Hey.
We're just talking about like some of our favorite Christmas specials and stuff because I kind of brought it.
The Year Without a Santa Claus. No contest.
Well, I was talking because earlier this week, due to not a lot of story, not a lot of news stories being around right now. I've taught on Tuesday. I decided to do a little profile on Hal Smith, who among he's an actor, voice actor, passed away in '94, but he was known for basically portraying for voicing Santa Claus in a number of Christmas specials, most notably from Hanna-Barbera. Yogi's First Christmas, A Flintstones Christmas, and even later on, in a Bonkers episode,
Listen, I have issues with the Flintstones Christmas even existing.
Oh yeah, why do you? Okay, what's your issues?
Because
How are they celebrating Christmas?
yeah, because Christmas wouldn't have existed back then, right?
Yeah, like in any form, right? I guess you could probably say that if they were celebrating the original Yule, that tradition should have went back thousands of years or whatever, but still, it doesn't. So it's like in any format, how are they celebrating Christmas?
I guess I can see your point, but here's I think what a lot of you would counter. It's a cartoon.
Yeah, I don't care. There's a reasonable suspension of disbelief even for cartoons. That's the one that it never got me, even as a kid. I'm like, they're one. Humans and dinosaurs shouldn't live together. That part I'm willing to suspend disbelief, right? That doesn't bother me at all. But you start adding Christmas into the mix, and then it just gets way too far.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I can see your point, because the idea is, if we're going on the idea that okay, the Flintstones are from the Stone Age, that probably does predate Christ's actual birth, and also and obviously would predate
Saint Nicholas doesn't exist yet either.
yeah, Saint Nicholas and all those, and even all the traditions that came out of that. But to your point, right? To your point, I think I just thought of an interesting counter too. Okay, we if you wanna find a way to suspend disbelief that much, with the Flintstones, right? You could argue that that in the Flintstones universe, right, they evolved a little bit differently than we did in our universe. That
Yeah,
if you think about it, if you want to take it to that point, okay, how are they intelligent enough to be operating dino powered cranes, right? Because
I don't know. You could also say, why are dinosaurs alive at the same time that people are? But that was the suspension of disbelief that I think I and almost everybody that watched the show was always willing to look past.
right.
Yeah. But
I mean,
see,
what you could argue is maybe on their world, first off, people evolved in a way to where they still maintain their caveman or Neanderthal,
Well, the thing is, Neanderthals were actually really intelligent.
yeah.
So what you're more saying is for the Flintstones, it was more modern day, but history had taken place. Most of history had taken place up until that point, so it would have been, a 19 whatever 57 or 60s.
Yeah, 19.
Supposed to be in the
1950s, but instead of like going through, instead of going through a lot of the evolutionary changes we went through, going from the Stone Age to like all the way up to the Industrial Age, it didn't manifest in quite the same way. It's still, basically from an aesthetic point of view, it still remained. They still remained in the Stone Age. But
yeah, but doesn't just the theme song?
I've got something
that
throws that out the window. I've got one fact that throws that whole thing out the window. The Flintstones and the Jetsons canonically take place in the same world.
Same universe. Yes, I was thinking of that. But
yeah, especially because of the time travel episode where they cross over.
Well, the movie,
so,
the movie. But yeah, the Jetsons meet the Flintstones.
But I was also thinking in the theme song for the Flintstones, doesn't it say a modern Stone Age family or something like that?
But then a
Yeah.
counter to your, but then here's a counter to your counter. Maybe they do kind of exist in either the same universe or a slightly parallel universe. Oh, actually, no, they have to be in the same universe, I guess. But but again, that's the idea of cartoons, though. There's a lot of suspension of.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the main thing is for doing Christmas in the Flintstones. It's not a matter of evolution in that case. It's a matter of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Well,
they're supposed to be before.
evolution from the point of how their society evolved, Rick, as opposed to evolution as you're thinking it like biological evolution.
Well,
I'm talking more about I
get what you're saying, but
evolution.
more with in your point that I think metal was, I guess you just mean societal, but yeah, if you're saying they went up to the 1900s or our time, as Stone Age type people.
Listen, I'm just saying, how can we have a Christmas without Christ? And how can we have Santa Claus without a Saint Nicholas, right? If they called it something else, if they had different names or anything altogether, I'd be fine with this.
Yeah.
But I just those two issues are just in my way.
Yeah, but I think the creators of the creators of the Flintstones, right?
Of that story, didn't think of that, obviously.
They probably weren't thinking about it, like we've seen with when we do the historical comic retrospect. There are probably some leaps in logic that they probably didn't think of. But then there's also the idea was, well, these characters are so popular.
They just wanted to make a Christmas special out of them.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, okay, if let me just ask you this, Metal. If you could get past that aspect, right, that logical leap that they take with it, if you could get past that, I don't know if you were a Flintstones fan or not, but
oh no, I love the Flintstones.
Yeah, but isn't there at least a part of you from a fan's perspective, right? And this goes towards a lot of what I talk. And I'll get to you in a moment, Mr. Yanafui. I'm just trying to complete my thought here quickly as I can. I see your comments. I'll reply in a moment.
I actually do have an explanation for that one too.
Yeah, but I think I do too.
But my point is, isn't there a part of you as a fan that if you could get past the leap in logic and all that, wouldn't there be a part of you that would like to spend time with the Flintstones at Christmas time?
No.
No?
No. Now, the thing is, this is how I don't know if I'd ever actually consider myself a fan of anything, because I think I use the word fan very specifically. It's short for fanatic. Enthusiast, yes, I'm an enthusiast for the Flintstones. I've probably seen every single episode of it. I watched all the reruns. Me and my dad would watch them together growing up. Like it was very, very, very good show, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say it's flawless. And it's like, do I want to spend time with these characters on Christmas if the episode's good? And that one little thing stops me from saying the episode's good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, if you could, that's why I was saying, if you could get past that, could you? Okay, let me put it another way. If there was a dimensional portal where you could take a walk in the Flintstones universe for a little bit, or even take the Christmas aspect out of it here, okay, for a moment. If you had a chance to visit the Flintstones universe, would you take it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that. I have to think about that really hard. Because the thing is, even things that I'm like the most enthusiastic about, I don't know if it'd be fun to actually take a walk in some of these universes. right? I mean, at least the Flintstones, by weird roundabout ways, have running hot water. Like at least that's an option. But
Mhm.
would I really want to take a walk around the Flintstones universe even for just a day?
Well, I think more of the question is, if you could bring the Flintstones to visit you where you live, would you do that?
If they wanted to hang out in my living room, sure, they could come over.
All right, that's another
I'll
way
teach
of
them
looking at
about
it.
Christmas.
Anyways, before we continue on, I did promise to, because I don't want Mystery on a Foodie to feel that we're ignoring him. I'm not ignoring him, just finding a good break to. So these streams are becoming scientifically complex. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we do like
I
partly
wasn't
because
I
even
just
being
think he's
complex about
teasing.
it.
I think he's teasing there a bit.
uh, and how do you explain the Star Wars Christmas special? Checkmate Jesus.
Well,
Now this
easy.
one, there should be an explanation for it, but the problem is George never actually did anything to make it canon. The humans in Star Wars are actually supposed to come from our Earth, but they exist in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago because of time travel stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've never heard that, but I was gonna just say easy enough to explain for that is it's called the Star Wars Christmas Special, but they never mention Christmas in it.
Yeah, that's another one too. They actually have a different name for it. I forget what it is, but there is a
Light Day
holiday
or
in.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like that. But it's not actually Christmas that they're celebrating.
Yeah.
It could have still descended from Christmas though, and I think it was approved for one of the extended universe novels. I don't remember which one, but in Lucas's original notes, they were supposed to become from Earth because that's the birthplace or home place of humans. And that through like a wormhole or something, they ended up there, and they weren't even aware that this is like prior to humans being made on Earth or anything. That was his explanation for why humans could be there and why they proliferated that entire galaxy. But it never got into any of the major sources, so most people don't even know about it.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
and if as somebody who basically said you kind of follow the Flintstones, or I don't know if you call yourself a fan or what have you, but a lot of people made the argument that the Flintstones is essentially the honeymooners just set in the Stone Age.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
yeah,
So I mean,
and in cartoon form.
well, yeah, in animated form basically, but just set in the Stone Age. And
Yeah, because I believe even Jackie Gleason, who was the main star of the Honeymooners, did voice Fred Flintstone.
well, yeah, well, that's something that they did quite a bit back then too. Is that they would have a number of celebrity guest stars come on.
Yeah, but he wasn't a guest star. He was, I think, the main voice of Fred
No,
Flintstone.
Jackie Gleason
No.
was not a voice. No, it was Alan Reed who was the. Okay, so when the Flintstones debuted in 1960, Alan Reed was the original voice of Fred, but he died. I don't know if it was he died. I think in like 1995 when they started having some of the Christmas specials come out in the 70s and 80s. He
was
was
77
replaced
when
by
he died.
Henry Corden. Okay, B. Benaderet also. B. Benaderet was the original voice of Betty Rubble until, of course, she passed away. I believe it was she passed away in 1968. So when they started in the in the 70s and 80s, they brought in another actress, Gay Otwig, I believe. So,
Mr. Yanafui says, "Can we give credit to the Sumerians for creating all the stories?" I don't know sure what stories you mean. The ones I would say out of the Bible aren't just stories; they're records of real life events. So I wouldn't give them credit for that.
well,
And
I think I can't be too sure, but I think the Gilgamesh story is set in Sumerian history.
Yeah. The problem is, it's the oldest writing that we have. It probably isn't the oldest story, right? Stories probably predate those civilizations. Even the story of Gilgamesh probably predates Sumeria being an empire, right? It's hard to tell what the actual oldest story is. It's just the oldest actual writing that we have, that we can
Right.
date the carving of the story to when it belonged.
Well, yeah, because the thing is that prior to the idea of writing and
It was all
printing
orally passed
and
down.
art, yeah, they would pass traditions and stories along via word of mouth. Grandfathers and fathers would grandparents and parents would pass the stories down to their kids, and their kids would pass the stories down to their kids, and
Yeah.
on and on and on.
Yeah, and some were better at doing it than others. Some added more, um, what shall we say, embellished a lot more than others, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And some embellished less
Okay.
or not at all. So, anything other than Christmas stories to talk about, Mike?
Well, yeah, because we did actually spend quite a few minutes there, and I was just waiting to see if Tim would join us to share his thoughts on what we read Friday.
I'll even be fair real quick, right? I'll be fair. I'm going to make a really nasty criticism about my favorite Christmas special, which is The Year Without a Santa Claus, right? Where Ice Miser is supposed to control the North and Heat Miser is supposed to control the South. But like, what are the actual limits on this? Because if you pass the equator, the further you get south, it gets cold again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you get to Antarctica and it's cold again.
Yeah.
Right?
The Arctic up north, and the Antarctic down south. Yeah, south, North Pole and South Pole, respectively. So, so, anyways, yeah. So I was just trying to think about what might be good to go, because I guess the one big story aside from my coverage of Hal Smith this last week, of course, on Tuesday. I guess one of the main stories that's been kind of going around a bit is in regards to that guy who basically went on YouTube and was talking about the demise of the comic book company and the professionals sitting there, Tom Brevoort and a few others, basically mocking him and saying, "Oh, your business dying because you're not willing to change with the times."
Yeah. Didn't we talk about that last week, or was that
We
in
probably talked about the Brevoort article last week, but not there was another one that came out that went into a little more, I guess, detail or what have you, which I think we could probably hit upon here.
Are you
I guess
talking about Glenn O'Leary?
Glenn O'Leary,
was-
yeah, that's
yeah.
the guy's name. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a comic shop owner. The
Yeah.
funny thing about that video is that it's actually been around, right, for like a couple of years or so, like just sitting there, and people only just now started hopping on it.
Oh, that was a couple years. That was from a couple years ago.
Well, the first time that he talked about it, yeah, it was just like an old video, and people just started getting around to it. I watched a few days ago. Mark Miller had him on his channel, Miller Time, and they were talking about it. And he was surprised that it kind of came out of nowhere, because that to him that video was old. It was just something that he ranted about.
Mm-hmm. Natalie Solis Invicti. All right. Yeah. Well, let me pull up the more recent article. Then we did talk. I don't know if we did or not, but I feel I could pull up a more recent article here. And I think they did mention a little bit about that too.
What Mr. Inafui is talking about is that's the Roman solstice festival. It's the birth of the invincible sun.
Oh, okay. Yeah, solis I know is a Latin word for sun. That's where we get the word solar from.
Yeah.
Right?
And it was usually just past the solstice, like the festival would start on the solstice. So the actual day was often on the 25th, which is probably one of the reasons why Christmas was put on the 25th, since it was kind of adopted by the Holy Roman Church. They did kind of replace their own Roman festival with something else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's see. Comic book pros mock deny complaints from veteran shop owner regarding abysmal state of market. Quote, his business is dying because he refuses to change with the times. Yeah, I remember when I initially was made aware of this story, watching one of Yellow Flash's videos. Yellow Flash talked about, yeah, they didn't even really try to answer the point he was making. They just went off on him just on any little stupid little thing, his
Well,
look, you know.
they they attacked him as a person or whatever. They didn't attack his points, thus showing that they have very weak arguments
Yeah.
or very
Article
bad
I
debaters.
yeah. Article by Spencer McQuilly published this past Wednesday. Um, so yeah, we'll go over the article here, and you guys can chime in with any comments, and if Mr. Yanafui has anything to say about any of this, let me know, and I'll see if I can respond. All right. So, in the latest instance of fan and retailer complaints concerning the state of the industry, falling on deaf, and now I think on deaf, if not unnecessarily combative ears, a number of comic book professionals have responded to a public plea from a veteran shop owner over the quality of Western publishers' current output with not consideration, but rather outright derision and mockery. Oh Lord, no, right there. Okay. The latest round of discourse first kicked off on December 1st, courtesy of the 42nd and latest episode of the Comic Palace Reborn. And this is this I guess a YouTube channel that Glenn O'Leary runs.
Yeah. The channel itself is called the Comic Book Palace, which I believe is also the name of the comic store. But then the show is no, it's the Comic Book Palace. You dropped the word book out of the title there.
Yeah, the comic, a slice of life YouTube series run by the owner of the eponymous Haven Hill, Massachusetts retail store, Glenn O'Leary, which documents the day-to-day interactions he experiences with customers in the shop. There he is right there, the Comic Book Palace episode 42.
Yeah, it's not a huge channel, but it's not small either. I'm sure a lot of these subscribers are probably newer because of the controversy, but it's like 6,500 subs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he probably has a lot of local subscribers. People from from his area there, his customer base.
Probably
Probably.
from the general mass area too, just because like even though there are more comic shops like per square mile in New England than there are like anywhere else, typically the ones that are still running, everybody knows it for like miles around.
Yeah. So, episode among the many individuals who speak to O'Leary is a customer referred to only as Mike. And no, that's not me. I'm all the way out here in California, so not me. Who during this time with the shop owner took the opportunity to lament the fact that Western comic book publishers, particularly Marvel Comics and DC, quote, keep watering in brackets, their books down, unquote. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't think though that what they're doing is watering down books, but
I mean, they could be. If you're talking about watering down is diluting the quality of it.
I guess. Well, yeah, I guess in a way. I mean, the big
Yeah.
thing is they keep trying to push agendas and stuff, and I think that's what's basically quote. I don't know if it's watered down or it's just kind of repeating the same stories in a different okay, in a different way. Yeah. Okay, now
I would call that watering down, repeating the same stories over and over. It's like it's trying to spread your lemonade thinner by adding more water to it. You know, it's like a bunch of different cups, same exact lemonade.
yeah, and also just the idea of all these reboots. Yeah, I think that's what they were talking about there. All the reboots, just constantly rebooting books and stuff like that.
Yeah, and when they do these diversity stuff, they do it in the laziest way. It's like they don't even really get their own stories; they get somebody else's, and it's literally their story. It's like this is one of the older ones at this point because when Miles first came around, it was before people started complaining about all this diversity stuff. But the first year of his life was basically like the first year of Peter's life. There was almost no difference. There was like a minor stuff about his family dynamic was different, but like he went through all the same stuff, you know. And most of the characters is like they just end up in this exact same fights, the exact same plots of the people they're replacing. They're not mostly doing new stories of their own.
Yeah. Well, heck, when Miles was first introduced in Ultimate Comics, he was actually, I don't think he was too bad there. You know, there was a reason for
not too bad about having a personality that was as flat as a brick.
it's been a while since I read them, so the comics. I didn't mind them, like they killed off Peter, although they were in the middle of
Yeah, they
bringing him
killed
back.
off Peter, resurrected him, killed him off again, resurrected him again.
No. They had only killed him off once. But it seemed like they were in the middle of bringing him back. Although I'm not sure whether it was the original Peter or not. But then, of course, the Ultimate line got canceled.
And then they eventually brought Miles into the main universe.
Yeah, which I think that was the biggest mistake, bringing Miles into the regular universe. At least if you're going to bring him in a different way. Don't make him the Miles from the Ultimate Universe.
No. They should have, right? This is how they should have solved Miles, right? And this way they could have had two Spider-Man at the same time. Give him a different name. Don't call him Spider-Man. That's important. Give him his own name, right? Call him Spider-Kid or something. It doesn't matter. But because he has no home anymore, there could even be like a Miles that never got powers in that universe. So it's like I can't even go home because there's already one with his family, right? He should have just hopped on like a motorcycle or whatever, and he should have just went across the country trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life now. And then we could have had Peter still doing things in New York, normal Spider-Man stuff, but you also would have had an excuse for somebody with Spider-Man's powers to be doing stuff across like the US.
That could be interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have. I don't think I would have minded that. I'm just, like saying, I think they even hinted at there was a crossover between 2016 616 Spider-Man I'm not sure whether I'm thinking of the movie or not, of the cartoon movie. But I think there might have been a crossover between Miles and the 616 before thing, and then when the 616 got back, he found a Miles or whatever, but it never showed him or whatever. I forget. It's been a while. Like I said, I'm thinking that was a storyline that they did, like a crossover.
Well, this is another thing contributing to the watering down, right? Is that the multiverse has kind of killed anything that's special in the Marvel universe, right? Not even just like seeing the same things play out in slightly different ways again and again in other universes in different stories. But also when you think about it too, since they believe in the actual like many worlds interpretation, that means there's infinite versions of every single world, right? There are infinite times that Uncle Ben's died, and there's infinite times that he didn't. Right.
Oh yeah, I remember they actually touched upon that idea in Spider-Man the animated series back in the 90s.
Yeah.
The last
Nothing
episode.
special in Marvel.
Huh?
Yeah,
Nothing is special.
Yeah, they touched in that where there was the Steel Spider-Man where Uncle Ben didn't die.
Mm-hmm. And then they had to bring that Uncle Ben over to deal with Spider Carnage. Anyways, getting back to the article here. Let's see. In a different way, said Mike, quote, "I get a lot of surprises from the indies," unquote. In turn, the show then cuts to find O'Leary, offering Mike even further examples of the industry's wanton mistreatment of the very properties they have been tasked with shepherding, beginning with his declaration that Marvel villain, quote, the Hood, was a fantastic character, and then they just made him idiotic, and they ruined a great character, unquote. You guys have any idea what they're talking about here?
I've heard of the Hood. I've seen them in I think a couple games or something or other, or maybe even a cartoon or whatever. But I can't remember a lot about him. I think he's almost like Dagger. I think. Or not? No,
Yeah,
Cloak.
I have to look up. I don't know him by name. Let me look at a picture of this guy.
I think he's similar to Cloak from Cloak and Dagger.
Okay, I've seen this dude before. Yeah, he like dual wields pistols that shoot out like fire blasts or whatever.
Quote, unquote, the shop owner continued, quote, the Hood comes out of nowhere, believe it or not. That idiot Brian K. Vaughan, I believe, came up with him. The guy from Saga, the guy that can't get a book out on time, right? He used to be a brilliant writer and a worker, but now he's just a lazy chump, unquote. Quite a damning criticism, huh? I guess this guy's the Hood right here.
Yeah. And they're even tossing around the idea that he might be the next big quote unquote street level villain for the MCU. Though I don't see anything big actually happening in the MCU. So.
Well, actually, one of the other things we were just talking about a retcon that I guess they just did maybe earlier this year or something like that. Metal, as you may know, I was going over some of the timely comic Marvel stuff that went on sale in January 1940 the other day with Tim. One of the characters we were introduced to everybody was Flexo the Rubber Man, who was most recently retconned to being the first symbiote in the Marvel universe.
Yeah. I remember being in the chat when you guys were talking about that, because Tim also brought off a character got like a redo in Marvel Zombies that he really liked, and I had to point out that Marvel Zombies is absolute trash.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, you were there. All right. So anyway, quote. So they get the Hood going. He's a main part of the Marvel universe, main part of the villains, unquote. Larry further detailed, ostensibly referencing Brian Michael Bendis, and I know a lot of people have been critical of him and his writings. Yellow Flash being one of them.
He was good at one time too.
Subsequent use of the villain as a major antagonist for his new Avengers team. Quote, that storyline ends. He just kind of disappears. Then he goes after the Infinity Gauntlet gems. Gets a couple gems, but he's just an idiotic clown. And then he disappears, and in brackets now he shows up once in a while. Unquote.
Also, Rick, I'm going to push back because you said at one point in time he was kind of good. He's exactly the person I'm just complaining about. I don't think Ultimate Spider-Man was ever good.
From what I understand, you're not. I don't think you're alone in that. From what I understand, I don't think you're alone in that assessment. From what I've heard, I think there are a number of people who have issues with the Ultimate Spider-Man canon.
Yeah.
Bendis takes 12 issues, like a whole volume, to get done what Ditko did in a single issue. Right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, maybe it's nice to stretch this out and explore it. Sure, if it wasn't for the fact that you're still writing paragraphs in every single bubble. It's like reading a novel just trying to get through Spider-Man's first issue.
Well, a while back when we were, because obviously Bendis Bendis come out a few times and has been involved in some interviews where he's shown his wokeness and all that, and his TDS and all that, and considering his name Bendis, I was thinking, it got me thinking of a very interesting nickname for him.
Yeah. Oh, and I think it was less than 12 issues. I think it was only like 4 or 6 issues before he became Spider-Man.
It was pretty much the whole volume.
By whole volume, you mean 12 issues, right?
Yeah, like the first year. It was pretty much the whole first year that it took.
I'd have to go back and check all fan, but I think it was less than that. But
Metal, let me ask you this: do you feel with the way Brian Michael Bendis wrote some of these stories that people are critical of, you think some of these fans felt like they were bent over?
Probably not. I mean, maybe now. Because a lot of people did like his stuff at first. And I don't think there's not room for his type of writing. I think he's just the type of person that's always been on the wrong book. He's definitely the type of person that should not be working with other people's characters, which I could say about a lot of people modernly in comics.
Oh, yeah.
They don't really have respect for so much of what came before them. If he was just writing his own independent stuff, which he did with Powers, and Powers... not my cup of tea, but I think like it had his flow and was really good, and it was his own sandbox he was playing in, is fine,
Oh yeah, we've been talking about that the last couple of weeks too. How how they a lot of these people are using these properties to push agendas more than anything else. Because they know that if they were to try to do it with, even as Yellow Flash put it, Actually, I don't know if it's Yellow Flash or it may have even been O'Leary himself. No, actually, it wasn't even O'Leary. It was somebody who was actually on RJ's channel this week. They talked about the idea of a lot of these writers doing a lot of self-inserting, and it's like,
yeah,
nobody wants your self-insert because nobody gives a hoot about you.
Well,
I mean,
I was just going to say, I think it depends on how you do the self-insert.
Yeah, I was going to say, because a lot of the main Marvel characters that we like are technically self-inserts, but they were kind of inserted by the people that actually made the world, right? So two things that people dislike. One, when you insert yourself into somebody else's world that's already in motion, right? Because it probably doesn't belong. The original people, like... a good example, a lot of people bringing up, and it is kind of true. Ben Grimm is basically Jack Kirby. They act the same. Before he transformed into the Thing permanently originally, he basically looked like Jack as well. They both smoke cigars and stuff. Their speech mannerisms are kind of the same too. It is basically just Jack Kirby as a superhero. right?
Mhm.
And that's fine because the world is built around these characters originally, right? Even before they started crossing over like crazy, the Fantastic Four like section of New York and the world that they do is built around these four characters. It gets weird when you start injecting people into it that don't belong from the real world, right? If they were to make their own story without, I mean, even in Marvel, you probably could, right? Because you could use other villains as long as you're respecting them. Instead of putting yourself in a different hero's story, if you just made a new hero that was like in their own town or whatever, and the lore of that town and everything was built around that hero, it wouldn't be so bad, right? And I think Marvel probably actually needs some new, completely unrelated to anybody, not stealing their like
Well, it's
icons
not
or
just
names or
happening at
mantle
Marvel though. Even not
or
it things we have
DC too, and
DC too.
yeah, like
Yeah.
they could use some of that. But then there's the second problem. So even if you formulate everything around this character, the character you're formulating it around needs to be interesting. And the difference is people like Stan and Jack lived very interesting lives, right? They were interesting people. Jack Kirby was hard as nails type person, veteran as well, right? Like these are people you would look up to generally, even if they weren't writing these comics.
Well,
A
you,
lot
you
of the
also
people that are
have to
coming in
remember
now,
these people, as you mentioned,
yeah,
Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, a lot of the creators that we know, from the golden age there, they were, involved in the war in some form or another. I mean,
yeah, and they all went through the Depression as well, right?
Mhm.
Like they went through hard times. It made them interesting people. A lot of the people writing now, they kind of like moved to LA. They've been in a bubble forever, right? And the most interesting thing that happens to them every week is brunch, which is why they write superheroes eating together in every single comic,
Yeah,
right?
I
They're
know
just
that,
not
that
interesting
was
people.
also another of Yellow Flash's criticisms. How it's like every book has the characters, at a coffee shop. It's like they sit around in coffee shops all day talking and then doing
Yeah,
something.
people don't actually hate self-inserts. They hate these things that most of the time come with them, right? They hate boring characters who go in and muddle worlds that are already in motion, right?
You
But
know,
there's a lot of times where you don't even know that a character is a self-insert, but because it's just an interesting character, and a lot of times the world is built around them, you actually love them.
yeah. Well, heck, I know. Like, and well, Metal will probably know this. Canadian Shield's got a little bit of me in him. I wouldn't say he's a total self-insert, but there's part of me in him. Same. It's gonna go for Insecto. Probably a lot more of me in Insecto, but still, I'm gonna.
And any writer's going to have themselves in the work, whether it's as an insert or just as like God's fingerprints on the world, right? But that's going to be a problem, right? I think, and I've told people this all the time. If you want to write good stories, you have to live an interesting life. And even if it means that you're not out there doing interesting things, you have to have friends who are interesting, right? Sometimes you're interesting by association. If you're not pulling new experiences into your stories, they're going to get stale and boring really fast.
So I would take it then that you would think that most people don't find Mindy Kaling or Whoopi Goldberg interesting, right?
Yeah. I mean, Whoopi probably
You know what
was
I'm
at one
you
point in
know what I'm
time.
referencing, right? In those
Yeah, no,
cases.
I do, but I'm just saying, like, Whoopi in the past, right? She probably had interesting things happening to her, right? Because she went through a rougher life early on, but like, it's been so long from there. Like, just so much time has passed. She's had such a nice life. I don't even know if she remembers what it was actually like. Not fully, right? It's like a fog.
Yeah, and I
And the
definitely would wonder.
the idea of I don't know if people would find that interesting or maybe just disgusting. The idea of having webbing coming out of your armpits.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that could be funny. If you were doing like a satire or like a comedy book, you totally could, right? It's
Uh,
the framing that's the issue.
yeah. Well, like,
like
yeah, if
you're
you're
trying
gonna
to
do
put
some
it
sort
in
of
such a
comedy
little
or
area.
It's like if you're going to do some sort of comedy or parody to Spider-Man, webbing coming out of his butt would be.
Which I think they did in Fairly Odd Parents, and that was pretty funny.
Yeah. But and then the whole idea of she gains powers because she's going through menopause.
Yeah, and that's a problem, right? So when you have nothing, I want to say nothing interesting.
See that might even be quote unquote interesting, maybe if you did it right. Unfortunately, somebody would say putting Whoopi's personality into a hero, I don't think works, and that's the major problem.
Well, she probably still thinks of herself as Guinan. You know who Guinan
Maybe.
is? Remember who Guinan is?
No, we wouldn't have a clue.
Guinan was a character on Star Trek.
On Star Trek: The Next Generation, she was the host of Them Forward. Yes,
Yeah.
I was being a little facetious.
No, I was saying, like, one of the problems you get to when your life really isn't that interesting, where you don't have that many problems going on, that many conflicts, you start focusing on what is a problem or conflict for you. So if everything in your life is going pretty swell, and you're a woman, well, yeah, there is a conflict that happens for a few days every single month regularly, right? So that's going to be what the person, what she would focus on. Is it that interesting? No, because everybody goes through it. Is it relatable? It could be, right? If you could try to spin it in a relatable way, if you're writing a book mostly for women, but maybe trying to cater in a way that it can help guys understand what's happening, sure. If you're going to do that, though, you probably need an original character. You're probably going to need help from a writer to figure out how to spin it in a way that's interesting. I don't think somebody who that's their only problem is going to make that interesting of a story on their own. But like that is the issue. Is the lack of issues.
Kind of like what Chuck Dixon's doing for Eric July.
Yeah. Like if you know that you've got an idea, but you aren't necessarily the most talented person in that area, and you've got money, you hire the talent to help you flesh out your idea.
Yeah. All right, so let's get back to the article here. We're having some pretty good conversation here too, so that's good. Proceeding to pick up a copy of the villain's then recently published appearance as an opponent to the eponymous Spirit of Vengeance in Ghost Rider Annual Volume 3, Number 1, O'Leary then closed out his specific thoughts on the Hood by declaring, quote, "So I'm hoping they do him well in this book," unquote. And there he is right there. Let's see. However, this brief moment of optimism was far from the end of O'Leary's thoughts on the overall topic. Prompted by his own recollection of the Hood's less than respectable publication history, the shop owner then turned to decry how, quote, now, in brackets, publishers, just make idiotic characters most of the time. They finally got somebody good, and they stopped using them. I don't know why. Change of the guard, maybe. Then again, maybe a different change of writers. Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. You guys agree?
Most likely, it might have to do with editors too.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards the editors, right? One of the big things that happened when they moved to LA is they lost their senior editorial staff, right? Because most of them didn't want to leave Connecticut, and everybody's been there. Is they've been churning editors, right, writer to editor, and then they won't stay, and there's no consistency. There used to be, if you had like these senior editors, even if you changed writers, there would still be a consistency from book to book because of the editors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the editors were there for years on end. Heck, most of the writers were there for years on end.
They would help you build your roadmap before you even start. It's like, okay, you're the writer now. What do you want to do, and what can we let you do? Right? Like you make your proposal, be like, okay, we have to shoot this and this and this down. You change your proposal until you've got something that both the editorial staff and you agree would be a fun thing to do for you and the readers.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I think we actually talked about that a little bit. We made note of it last week when somebody was pointing out that Chris Claremont had actually kind of was shooting out there the idea of having Nightcrawler born of a lesbian relationship before it was brought up here recently, and how it got shot down by the editors. So
I love Claremont. Claremont, a great writer. He's the guy who basically made X-Men as we know it now, right? Like you completely reformatted to the way that like everybody treats them going forward. But like all writers, they have a bunch of ideas. Many of them probably shouldn't stick to the wall, and a lot of times you need an editor to tell you which ideas just aren't necessarily that good.
We got Kem here, and he's asking a couple questions. Not quite on topic, but
well, yeah, that's just as well. What's your favorite Point Nemo? Don't have one. Don't even know what.
Don't know what it is.
What's your favorite? The Bloop.
Point Nemo is the most remote place in the ocean.
All right, and then the Bloop. I have no idea what that is either, but anyways,
which I think definitionally you can only have one favorite Point Nemo because there's only one most remote and inaccessible place in the ocean, which is Point Nemo.
Well, I have no idea what that is either way. So
yeah,
and I have no idea about the second one either. So.
It's just north of Antarctica and south of Easter Island. It's very hard to get to, which is why it has its name.
All right. Well, anyways, so his attention's now fully focused on the industry at large. O'Leary then speculated that this overall decline in the industry's quality was due to the fact that, quote, writers nowadays, they don't care about who or what the character is anymore. Well, yeah, because it's not their character, right? They're not the ones who created these characters.
I don't think it's just because it's not their character, right? But it's because they never cared about the character, or
they have more of an agenda that they want to do than write a good book or whatever.
Yeah, and not necessarily a political one all the time. But I do think it is. You stop caring about a character when you're trying to serve an agenda more than progressing the character. And a good example of this, it's one of my least favorite stories, and what I think started the downfall of Marvel specifically, Civil War by Mark Millar. Love Mark Millar. I think he's a great writer when he's working on his own stuff. Shouldn't touch other people's characters. Why? Because he cares about the story he wants to write more than he actually cares about the character, and had to completely change the personalities of all the main Marvel characters to make Civil War work. And those are also still the personalities of the characters that we got after that story. He basically just flipped the switch. These are the characters now. Deal with it.
Civil War was this the storyline where they had
Cap versus Iron Man,
where they had Jean Grey put like some kind of subliminal idea?
No, that I believe that was after.
No, this was 2006, and it was a really delayed 9/11 Patriot Act story, right? And Miller came in, and their big event, because they have to do big events now. And they set up this whole system where there's a superhero registration act, and Iron Man was on the side of wanting everybody with superpowers or vigilante to go and sign the registration. And Cap was on the side of, no, this is a horrible idea. What are you doing? And they fought it out for like 6 months straight, almost kind of like a year. There's like a volume of it. There's a bunch of side stories too. If you add everything together, there's more of a year of content, but horrible story. at least the main story anyway, because none of the characters act the way they do to be able to get the story to work. Even the setup is kind of horrible. I can't remember the name of the youth team. You might, Rick.
The New Warriors.
New Warriors, yeah, with like speedball and all that. They people just got attached to this team, and then the very first issue of Civil War, they nuke the whole team and kill them.
Except for
And that's what
Speedball.
starts
These new
Yeah.
warriors have no relation to the new warriors like we were just talking about like 2 or 3 years ago.
No, this is much
Space
older. This is the
Station.
2005 New Warriors run.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been better if it was the more recent ones.
Oh yeah, nobody would care if those guys got nuked. But yeah, that started the whole thing, and it's awful. And it also led into all of these other things happening too off the back of that, because
Yeah.
for the story to work, they had to get both Thor and Hulk off world. So just before Civil War starts, there's this little thing that happens where the Illuminati decide to launch Hulk into space, so that at the same time, though the run was slightly after, you have Planet Hulk is happening, right? And Thor Ragnarok is also happening around the same time. The run is slightly after, just so these two characters aren't around, because they're characters that would definitely make the fight a lot more one-sided, right?
Although Tony's side did create a fake Thor.
Yeah. And then it also leads to World War Hulk, which I think is awful. It also leads to One More Day is a direct result of Civil War.
Oh yeah, I know.
Which is one of the worst things that ever
One
happened.
More Day was very. I know a lot of people panned that too. That's the one where Mary Jane was killed or something like that, right?
No,
Their marriage
Peter
got basically annulled. Yeah, but it more of wiped out from history by a deal with Mephisto.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I know
and,
that was. I know that gets talked about a lot with not with not.
And what happened with
And that's
the
a direct
New War-
result of Civil War, though, right? Like, that does not happen without Civil War. Civil War, to me, is actually the downfall of Marvel Comics. Even before they started pushing all this other agenda stuff, well, Miller had an agenda. He wanted... And I don't think it's wrong to write a story where you're making an allegory or like an allusion to the Patriot Act. I don't think that's the issue. It becomes an issue when none of the characters matter for the sake of the story you're wanting to write. That's an agenda of its own.
Okay, I'm going to ask. It's on topic but off. How would you say they changed all the characters or some of the characters? Like say Iron Man and Man.
Iron Man's a big one. Because up to that point, Tony had made a lot of character progress where he would not have made those.
Keep talking, guys. I've got to step away from the computer for a moment.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Right?
So you don't think Tony would have been for the Registration Act?
No, not at that point. I mean, if you picked like Tony from 15, 20 years ago, maybe. But at that point, he would have been wildly against it.
Okay.
They also made Cap an idiot, almost like he was this like a redneck for the sake of it, instead of this boy from Brooklyn.
I don't think it. Well, I read them myself, or most of it. I don't think they made him too much. I don't think they made him an idiot.
They were trying to paint him as like he was the simple man with the heart of gold, right? Which, I mean, Cap is supposed to have a heart of gold, but he's not supposed to be simple. They changed a lot about him, only to try to make the sides seem more fair, right? Like Miller was trying to even the sides out. Although, even across the course of events, Cap's side was the right side.
I agree with that.
Right, the ending of it's horrible too, because Cap basically
died.
Feels like he wins and he lost at the same time, and he kind of like leaves. Right.
He
gives conceding to Tony.
Yeah, just because he doesn't want to see war in the streets, and the civilians paying the price.
But also, it's not even about like the sides too. A lot of these events just wouldn't happen based on who the characters were at that point, right? Like a lot of these fights in the street specifically, like these guys are heroes normally. And just because they don't agree with each other doesn't mean they would put civilians in harm's way. Like, there's all kinds of just issues with
Yeah.
this story.
The one thing that I'm not so sure I'm iffy on for that story, of course, because one of the major plot points to it, of course, what happens is, of course, Peter Parker revealing his secret identity to the world. What if he done that? Do you think um, Tony would have been able to actually convince him?
I don't know. That's rough. Like, in that setting, that's probably one of the things that you could argue makes the most sense, because he had been living with Tony for a while now. Mary Jane and Aunt May had been living in Stark Tower, so he probably would feel that they're more secure. But that's also isolated, because, like, also think, like, how often does Stark Tower get attacked, right? Like, you might feel like it's the most secure place, but it also gets attacked all the time. People know you're living there now. Like, it's not a smart idea. It actually makes Peter a little dumber than normal, but he had also built up a lot of faith in Tony as a character. He kind of became like a surrogate father figure to him. So
Yeah.
it's a complicated one. I think the bigger problem is I don't think Tony would have asked Peter to do that if it was their actual line. Less that I don't think Peter would listen to him. I think it's more of like he would have never asked him.
Yeah.
So, getting back to the article now.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, part of the reason we have these panels is to get into these discussions, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
brought it
But
up
we
because
don't.
it is very pertinent to the conversation. It's even before the social justice stuff, there has been for a while a lot of agenda-driven writing where the characters suffer because of it.
Well, some people would even argue that, particularly as we get into World War II, right? There
Yeah,
was
there was a lot of
that
agenda-driven writing in
there
World
was
War
that
II.
idea being pushed back then too. That you had
Yeah.
these comic
Well,
writers.
the one thing though for back then versus today, back then their personalities weren't as established, and B, back then the story there wasn't a continuity like there is today either.
Well,
So
you can also argue somebody like Cap, right, who is a agenda character, but he was built for that story, right? Like, he exists purely for that. It's what builds his personality. There's no problem with that, right? And it's one of, like, if they were willing to take more risks, let these people. I don't even think all these writers would necessarily be the worst writers if they were purely on their own story. Now, maybe people still wouldn't be interested in their story. There'd be a lot less complaints about it. It just, wouldn't be sales. But I wouldn't care if, like, in this town, you make a new city. They do this all the time in Marvel and DC, more in DC than Marvel, because, like, every DC superhero has their own city. But go just make a new city for this character. And if you want to drive an agenda with a new character and the whole story is built around it, go have fun. Can't promise it'll sell, but just go have fun with it. I don't care.
or you don't even have to make a new city. Okay, just put them in Portland or somewhere like that.
Sure, because Portland philosophically would probably agree with their agenda anyway.
Yeah, but
right?
my
Have a
point
Seattle
is,
hero.
Which Portland? Because there's Portland, Oregon, there's Portland, Maine.
Yeah, well, I'm talking the more famous one of them. But you know what? Even if you put them, just you don't have to put them in New York. You can put them in some other city in the States, or you don't have to
You put them in
LA.
LA, San Francisco. Yeah. There's plenty of places.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking, a liberal city. You could even put them in a conservative city, but it's
Don't know
not that it would necessarily work. But the point is, you can build them up in another city somewhere. You could even build them up in New York or whatever. So what? We got another hero in New York. Big whoop.
Well, even DC did that quite a bit more earlier on. Everything, before they even were able to establish Metropolis and Gotham City, the stories either happened in Cleveland or New York in the very early days of DC.
Well, I think with Metropolis, they never really said where Metropolis was or Gotham at first. Now they're established as their own cities and their
On the
worlds.
East Coast, Metropolis, I believe, is considered in Delaware and Gotham cities in like New Jersey or something like that, from what I understand. But anyways,
Yeah.
let's get back to the article here. So his attention's now fully focused on the industry at large. O'Leary then speculated that this overall decline in the industry's quality was due to the fact that, quote, writers nowadays, they don't care about who or what the character is anymore. Most of these new writers don't have a love of comics like these older writers had. All they care about is, quote, how do I put myself in the book? Which I would say we'd all agree is pretty true, right? What we were just
Yeah.
talking about. And
Well,
here's you guys
actually,
remember this one from last year? You guys remember this one from last
Yeah.
year?
sort of.
Dark
And
Potter?
actually, it's not even how do I put myself in the book. It's how do I put myself in the character, which is worse.
Yeah. Like trying to put on somebody else's skin, right?
Yeah, trying to live in somebody else's shoes, but you want to live as you in them, not try to get a view of their life.
Yeah. To this end, the shop owner declared, quote, no, we don't care what you would do if you were this is basically what I was one of the points I was mentioning earlier. Don't care what you would do if you were Iron Man. We don't care who you are. You're writing Tony Stark. You're not writing yourself in a book. If that's
No,
the case,
you're not writing again. It's not writing yourself as Tony Stark. If they want to write themselves into Iron Man or whatever as another character, fine.
but I think the point he's making is that's
Yeah,
exactly what they're trying to do here. They're trying to actually write as if they not even as much not as much as Iron Man, but as Tony Stark. It's like I think that's the point he seems to be making here.
See, if I was writing and I wanted to put myself in one of these worlds, like I was hired to write it, I wouldn't even make the hero me, right? I would add a new villain that's basically me. And obviously, the character would lose at the end because the hero has to ultimately win. That's the point of the story. But man, would I make them earn it, right? Because you're supposed to make the hero suffer. It's like, I think that would, if you wanted to insert yourself into the world, creating a villain that will ultimately be defeated, which there's, some humility to that already, is the best way to add yourself to a world.
Mm-hmm. If that's the case, write your own comic with you in it. No one will read it because nobody cares. Yeah, that was again the point I was making earlier when I was talking about it earlier.
Well, that's what I was saying too. Like, I don't mind agenda-driven storytelling. The problem is, even if you're writing new characters, right, your own stuff, you still have the balance of the characters have to be interesting. They have to suffer. There has to be something going on to be able to make your agenda work. Just do it in original stuff, and I can't promise it'll sell. But at least you're trying. At least you're taking risks, and that's what storytelling is actually about: is taking risks. I think changing a character that's already established to being yourself is a risk for the company, but it's not really a risk for you as a writer.
Well, it's a risk in one way. Will I ever get hired again after this book?
Well, apparently that's not a problem for these guys, apparently.
Yeah.
So, anyways, quote, people are growing up loving Peter Parker, loving Miles Morales, loving Captain America, unquote, O'Leary added. Quote, we don't need you to put your input in it. Just write Steve Rogers. Don't write, what would Steve Rogers be if I was Steve Rogers? Unsmaller quote. That's not how it works. But that's, again, how most of these new people write nowadays. I don't know. Okay, may spell. That's why most of the stuff is bleep. Because, in brackets, readers don't care about what, in brackets, a given writer would do because we don't care about your life whatsoever. Unquote. Sound like somebody was about to say something there?
No,
No, but I do have something to say on that because, like, I agree. And this is what I'm talking about with risk taking. It's hard to write an established character that's been around for as long as these people are, right? Like, you want to write off of the most recent version of them, assuming things had progressed well. But that means you're trying to take a character, you're trying to understand that character and make decisions that they would make, but also you're trying to do something that hasn't been done with that character 100 times already. And it's actually harder to write a character now than it was when the character was new, right? Because you've got
yeah,
all this baggage to go on, and you're also trying to not just like retread over old ground, which is also why you need to be more careful about the people you hire. You can't just let anybody work on this stuff, or else you're just going to make bad stories.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Heck, and I had one. Not that I've really wanted to work for DC or Marvel, but I had thought about writing a Superman story or Batman story or some story, and I'm like, how the heck do I write this? Yeah, I've watched Superman. I don't know how many times, but it's
Well,
like this isn't my character. I don't, as much as I've watched all this stuff 1,000 times, I don't really know the character well enough to write it.
well, yeah. I mean, that like part of the idea of the historical comic retrospect that I do, right, is that idea of even if only for a moment in time, making yourself a part of that universe, not necessarily becoming any of the characters, but like as I pointed out the last couple of weeks, the idea of you had a chance to go there and visit and take a walk in that universe, would you do it? And how would how would your interactions be with those characters? You know, that's one of the things I kind of emphasize or really go towards. Um, and then once you get to a certain point that you want to get to, once you've learned all the history of a particular universe, then maybe you just can kind of take things from there where you might want to take them. Not to where a case of okay, what would you do if you were that character, but more like how things might work out, with you in that universe.
Well, here's another tough thing too, right? Where people about the self-insert. Here's where it gets really tough. It's after you create the character, separating it from yourself, because that character is not you anymore, right? Doesn't matter even if it started as you. It's not, because it's going through things you didn't go through. At a certain point, you can't even predict what you would do in those situations because you've never been through them. And you like it's one of those things that you just don't know what you don't know. So you're just making your best guess. But things are going to be constantly changing over time, right? And it's like you're basically writing a completely different person from
Yeah,
yourself at that point.
All right. So, anyways, back to the article here. Let's see. Yeah. Just write a quote. Just write a book. Get paid for what you do. Get paid for what you're supposed to be doing, and make it a good story. Unquote. He finally concluded. Quote. We don't need your opinions. Unquote. And that is definitely true too. Initially, O'Leary's take did not garner any widespread attention. As of writing, the relevant episode of The Comic Palace Reborn sits at only 5,516 views, and I think you were saying, one of you were saying that it's up to over 6,000 now, I guess. Um,
Yeah, it was like 6,500 subscribers at the moment when I checked.
yeah, and
well,
that's
this is
just
talking
the
about
view for
views,
that.
not yeah. So we're talking about two different things here.
Yeah, well, I didn't
However,
bring up the views before. I only brought up the subs.
yeah. However, this all changed when, a few days after the premiere, the segment in question was clipped and shared to Twitter by user at DefNot T. Now, when I saw some, and I know Yellow Flash had also shown this in his video as well. When I saw this, RJ was actually tagged in this too. You'll see this in a moment. You'll see what I'm talking about here. So the guy's name is Ty, Def Not Ty. 30-year comic shop owner at Bleeding Fool, at Marvel, at DC Official, at Jim Lee, at Todd McFarlane, at CB Sabolsky, at Chris Braley, at Critical Blast. So I noted that RJ got kind of tagged in that. Of course, has his company named Critical Blast, but still nonetheless. But when O'Leary's opinion finally caught the attention of the very industry he was criticizing, its members chose to issue showing any semblance of humility or self-reflection in favor of not just insulting the frustrated shop owner, but blaming him for the problems that they themselves have wrought. In a now deleted tweet, former Venom Volume 4 and Thor Volume 6 dismissed O'Leary. So I think they missed something there. Dismissed O'Leary. Donnie Cates is who I think they're talking about here. Dismissed O'Leary, sarcastically writing, quote, "Don't you guys hate how when you go into a hardware store, how the guy behind the counter always tells you how much hammers suck," unquote. Now, I know that, and we may have talked about that because I think this was also in the other article we read too.
Yeah.
I know Yellow Flash had said this is a bad example.
Oh yeah, very bad. Because it's more complaining about to me more like a specific hammer rather than just hammers in general.
I think a better thing would be relaying that customers are always complaining about Black and Decker products and they're not selling because they fall apart after you take them home. That would be closer to what's going on. Because even him, which I think I misspoke earlier. What he was saying was that his channel's been running for a couple years and he only just got noticed now. But like he's been talking about this stuff for a while. And it's all like the customers aren't buying this. The customers aren't buying that. That's what these complaints are, right? Mm-hmm. So if we were in this case, it'd be like, well, the customers just aren't buying Black and Decker drills because they fall apart on them when they get home. Mm-hmm. Like that's what these complaints really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and although he probably reads this stuff, so he's a bit of a customer too. So.
The creator of Ahoy Comics, The Wrong Earth, Jamal Igle, likewise claimed, quote, he's going to be real shocked about how all comics have been written and how writing in general works. His business is dying because he refuses to change with the times, unquote. What do you guys say to that?
I need more context. I don't even quite understand what he's trying to say here.
Yeah, well, change with the times. How do you know he's not changing with the times? You don't know what his comic shop is like.
Well, I also want to be more specific about like how writing works. Like, what does he mean by this?
Okay, so
yeah, there's quote, that too.
Okay, so quote, there's a simple rule in sales, unquote, continued the former Marvel Comics and DC artist in response to a user questioning O'Leary's decision to publicly decry the abysmal state of the industry. Quote, showing contempt for the product shows contempt for the customer. Don't do it. Sell everything like you love it, unquote. Okay, there's an inherent problem with that statement. It's like
the customers are showing contempt for the product.
Right, partly, and also that this is the analogy I used the other day when I covered this article, right? Okay, no matter how much perfume you put on feces, it's still feces. Okay?
But and also, they're looking at sales completely wrong, right? Because comic book are the middleman, right? They are a reseller. That's what they do. They buy from the company, they sell to people. They are not the marketing department of the company. He's not a DC salesman. He's not a Marvel salesman. He's not supposed to be trying to convince people to buy comics that they weren't interested in otherwise. His job as a seller is to get comics to people who want comics, right?
Right.
Now, I agree that he should probably change with the times. If the comics are not selling, stop ordering them. Right? Stop buying those titles from the original seller, from Marvel or DC or whoever, and just
Yeah.
only order the stuff that are selling, and order
Yeah.
more of it if they're selling.
It's like a regular bookstore. They don't order books that don't sell.
And it's not their job
And
really
I
to
know
market. Like,
and I know
you
we
could put a
talked a lot
display up.
about how a lot of comic
No,
book shops are changing with the times, transitioning from being not just being comic
To like
book
hobby stores.
retailers to being hobby shop retailers.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he is probably changing with the times and how he markets his store to let people know.
Yeah.
His job is just to let people know that his store exists and that they can come buy these products there.
And he does need to move products, but that's the problem, right? Is when you're a reseller, your main goal isn't to move a specific product, it's to move as much of the stuff that you buy as possible. And if a lot of it's not moving, then you have to change what you're buying to sell, right? To be able to move as much volume as possible.
To make money.
Because you're just not gonna do that with Marvel and DC these days. And it's sad because that's what basically made the comic shop if we roll back the clock like 30 years, right? Like that's what sold everything. You could rely on those two alone and didn't matter what other things that you had in your shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But anyway, so in performing his own write-off of O'Leary's concerns, former Spider-Man franchise editor Tom Brennan asserted, quote, 30-year comic shop owner knows nothing about how comes have always been made. I guess that's supposed to be, again, another editorial issue there, typo.
Comics have always been made. How do you
Well,
know he doesn't
had it
know?
right in the actual tweet. It's a bounding into comics issue there.
Yeah. So, adding his own thoughts, current Carnage Volume 3 and Detective Comics Volume 1 writer, okay, I had an issue with that because Volume 1 is what we've been reading, the Golden Age one, so I don't know, unless Ram V was...
They've went back. I think they went back to their regular numbering system, the original numbering system. So they're over 1,000. So that's why it's Volume 1.
Anyway, writer Ram V, or Ram 5. I don't know if that's supposed to be a V or the Roman numeral 5. But anyways, pushed back. Quote, anyone who describes writing as, quote, you get paid to write the stuff we want has not a clue about what writing is about. And before you respond, because I'm sure you guys are going to have a response to this. Let me finish this portion, just because I had my own share of responses too to it. Quote, I don't know how many times people need to hear it. That is simply not how art or creativity works, he added. Now, I disagree with him on this, in this particular case. His point is valid if he's talking about the stuff that they themselves created.
Yeah. Yeah. His point is valid if you're not.
Point is valid, okay? But the thing is here, this, for the most part, this stuff is not stuff that they created.
Yeah.
Well,
his point.
They use the word shepherding at the beginning of the article there. They're writing somebody else's characters.
Yeah.
And so that's what's getting a lot of people upset.
The the point is valid if you're not being hired to do something by somebody else. They're
Yeah,
being
I'm actually
hired.
more on Rick than that. It doesn't even matter if it's your character or not. Because if a publishing company hires you, even to make a new character, they might put restrictions and guidelines on what you can or can't do with that character, right? Which even happens in the novel industry, or used to happen quite a bit. I mean, the novel industry has been degrading faster than comics and earlier. But like, it doesn't matter who hires you. If Hollywood hired you and be like, okay, but we're only going to make something with this rating, which means that your character has to fight, or everything that happens has to fit within these guidelines, or we want you to write a character that fit, or a story that fits this genre or this theme. You're going to make a horror story. This is the type of horror story you're going to make. Like, this happens all the time, even if you have otherwise total creative control over it. And that's working in an industry versus being an independent publisher.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but the thing I think the point here is that I think O'Leary and his customers are getting at is that, which is counter to what Ram V is saying, is that if Ram V and some of these other pros, as it were, want people to buy their books, then they should be going with the characters that they grew up with, not.
Oh no, I agree. That's
yeah,
what I'm saying.
yeah.
If a company hires you, you make what the company needs you to make. The bigger problem here again is not writing or creativity, right? It's editorial, because editorial should be putting a leash on their writers.
The
What I'm saying is,
the
and
editorials are just corrupt as the editors are just as corrupt as the writers in this case.
yeah, well, I think what me and Metal are saying is, if we hire Ram V to write for, say, we're DC or Marvel, we hire them to write Superman, right? He's supposed to write Superman, not, you don't get to just do whatever you want with Superman. This is Superman. You have to write Superman.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
or even likewise, I can extend it because this leash doesn't stop, right? You're working at DC. You make a new character. I don't know. Maybe you're making Super Grandma. Turns out Clark's actual birth grandma is still alive for some reason. Doesn't matter. New character, right? You're writing Super Granny. You know, everybody else in that story still has to function the way that they did. Like, you bring Superman in, he still has to function like Superman. And this character, even though it's new, still has to act in accordance to how DC comic should be. Like, even with new characters, you're still on the leash working in DC's world. Right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Because you're being paid and hired to work for them.
in terms of what you were just talking about, let's say that they discovered that, okay, Superman's or Kal-El's grandmother escaped, was alive at the time when the planet exploded, and two, found a way to escape to Earth and was
Yeah, and she was like
years later,
cryogenically frozen that whole time, so she's still just
Supergirl,
herself.
okay,
You
but
know?
You would still think that she should still act in accordance with what you would typically think a Kryptonian would act like, right?
Yeah, you don't have just complete free reign, even though you're otherwise working with a new character. And it's because you're being paid by a publication to make something that's specific, right?
Yeah.
Like, it applies whether you're working on something that is totally new, whether you're working on, I would call it recycled characters. Any character that is still being written past their original writer leaving is just a recycled character that has become an icon that we all love. It doesn't matter whether you're getting hand-me-downs or not. You work for a company, and you have to write things the way the company wants. And with that in mind, that's why I blame editorial, right? It's the hires up of the company, said just as corrupt as everybody else. They just don't care anymore, right? They want these people writing this stuff. The editorial is more to blame than the writers, because otherwise there would be a leash on these writers.
Yeah, and then even more so, you got to blame.
Or they wouldn't hire them. That's also another thing.
Yeah, anybody higher than the editors, because.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know a number of commentators have been talking about how we may be seeing the early stages of the full demise of comics, right? The mainstream comic industry, anyways, because they're not, you're like totally perverting and just going against what the people who actually will pay money for Okay, you're totally just telling flipping the bird at the people who are actually spending the money to buy your comics. Or to where you don't have to go on YouTube or whatever, or on X or whatever, and beg people to buy a comic, right? We saw that recently too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you? I was gonna say, can you just go up just a touch to the line that was just before? For
I can just as soon as I find my cursor, I click on that screen.
yeah, right. Oh, right there. Yeah, he said. Oh no, just down below the picture there, right there. Because yeah, he's saying adding his own thoughts. What's it? You get paid to write stuff. That's exactly right. They're getting paid to write stuff by somebody. It doesn't mean they can go off on their own and write whatever.
Right.
The key word there is you get paid to write stuff or keywords.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Retweeting these posts, Silver Surfer, Rebirth, and Warlock, Rebirth author Ron Mars, and from what I hear, some people have some criticism of that guy. Affirmed, quote, "This is not a rest." Oh yeah, we talked about this last week. This was in the article last week that we read too.
Yeah.
Quote, "This is not a restaurant, and you don't get to order what you want off the menu." Unquote.
Actually, that's exactly sort of what it is as a restaurant because you have a list of what's on there, and either you order it or you don't.
Mhm.
And if people aren't ordering it, guess what? Hopefully, it gets a successful.
Well, I think when he
restaurant
says
will-
restaurant, right, we got to look for the perspective of these people where they live. They're probably thinking, it even says, like, say, a steak medium rare with mashed potatoes. They're thinking of a sit-down restaurant where you can customize your order, right? That's what he's talking about. While this is actually closer to a general store or a corner store, right?
Mhm.
Where there's a bunch of food, it's all prepackaged, but still, you get to pick what you want. If you don't want it, it's just going to sit on the shelf and go bad eventually.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Asked
Well,
by. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna. I didn't quite finish my statement, but I was just gonna say, if it's a good restaurant, if it's not selling, it gets taken off the menu, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, asked by @SmithD33, quote, "Don't you though?" Unquote. Mars then elaborated on his argument, stating, quote, "No, you don't. At a restaurant, you order what you want, say a steak medium rare with mashed potatoes, and it's made to order, just for you. Batman comic or any comic are not made to order just for you. You buy or don't buy something that's already made."
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be like going to, like I said, it's more like a general store or something where all the products are pre-made. It's like going to a bakery, but it's not like a bakery that does custom cakes. You could just only buy what's on display, right?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
if McDonald's didn't let you take the pickles off the hamburgers, it's like you order it and that's it. There's nothing else. The soup Nazi from Seinfeld.
Mhm.
Yeah, but even with the regular thing, if steak's not on the menu, you can't order steak, right? You can't even order it to the temperature.
Well,
that you
it
want.
depends, right? And this is like a lot of these sit-down restaurants are more flexible, right? Like I've gone to places. I remember, what's the name of the place? It's a chain, but it's like an actual restaurant. It's not. It's bothering me, but it's a Mexican food place, right? And they stopped serving my favorite, which was the carne asada, which is a type of skirt steak, right? But I asked them, and like it's not on the menu anymore, but we can make it for you because they still had everything they needed to make the carne asada, even though it's not on the menu.
Are
Because
you
they put it
talking
in
Taco Bell?
No, it's not Taco Bell. No, I'm talking about like an
talking about
actual
a
restaurant.
restaurant, like maybe El Torito or something like that.
No, it's let me. While I'm talking, I'll find it. But it's they had everything they needed to make it, even though it wasn't on the menu anymore because it's in their fajitas and everything. And they're like, no, we'll make it for you though, because that's how a lot of sit down restaurants are. As long as they have the stuff to make it, they will, because the chef knows how to make different things. Like he
Yeah.
can assemble the ingredients in different ways, and then the person running the place, like a manager or whatever, will just ticket you a price. Like it's like, oh yeah, we add all this stuff together. This is how much it should cost. That's how a lot of sit down restaurants are.
I've never usually ordered anything that's not on the menu. The most that, and I don't think I've ever done it, is like a substitute. You know, can I
Yeah.
have fries instead of a baked potato? And usually it's like Wendy's here at least, says okay, you can have the Happy Meal or the value meal, but you can have it with fries, a salad, or a baked potato.
Yeah, we're already at the hour 50 mark here,
Mhm.
so I think I'm gonna try to get through this a little bit quicker here.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. See. So yeah. All right. Yet, despite the widespread denigration of the very industry on which he relies on to make
On
a
the
living,
border.
what was that?
On the border. That was the restaurant I was thinking of.
On the border? Okay. O'Leary did not walk away from the discourse without his supporters. Not only did he receive written support from fan favorite Power Girl Volume 2 writer Jimmy Palmiotti, who in a now deleted tweet revealed, quote, "It is something I tell newer writers all the time. I read all the history of the character and understand their motivations and why the audience fell in love with them, It will help you understand who they are, so if you change anything about them, it's in line with who they are," unquote. But he was also invited to appear on the Ultimate Volume 1 writer Mark Millar's Miller Time live show to discuss the entire debacle. So there we go. So what did you think of that last statement, guys? That, you told me.
It's true.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would wholeheartedly agree with that as well. All right, so there we go. That was a pretty good discussion, though, we had, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to double down. I do think, in fact, that these people are writing what they're being paid to write, and that's actually the problem,
Hmm.
right? A lot of
Yeah.
them are being paid to write agenda-driven stuff. So just stop buying it. Which we're seeing people are stop buying it anyway. But like
Yeah,
the stores,
that's kind
if
of
the
the
sales
that's
go
kind of
down,
the point
stop buying
that's
it,
happening.
right? Just because
Uh-huh.
5 people come to your store and buy it, tell them it's like, sorry, 5 people's not enough, right? Like if you want
Mhm.
to special order, I will order it in and it'll be here that week. Like it'll be in your pull list, but I'm not buying enough to put on the shelf, right?
Mhm.
That's it. Anything else, just only buy what sells.
Well, you know that these writers and editors have got to have a screw loose in there when you got writers sitting there coming out and begging people to buy your book to quote unquote stick it to Comicsgate, or when you tell your customers, your people who would be wanting to buy your book or possibly buy your book, when you're telling them, well, if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book. And then when they follow
Don't
through
buy your
on
books.
the advice, you come back and lament, oh, people aren't buying my book. I wonder why. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, well, we're going to start to wind things down a bit. Of course, today being Sunday, December 10th, 2023. Let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche, or this weekend rather, in Nietzsche history. History! So first off, I'm going to head back to yesterday, December 9th. On this date, on yesterday's date rather, back in 1933, 90 years ago yesterday, Warner Brothers, Buddy's Showboat, and Walt Disney Productions, The Night Before Christmas, both premiered in theaters on yesterday's date, back in 1933, 90 years ago yesterday. Buddy was actually the second character created by Warner Brothers after Bosco. Of course, these characters predate even Porky Pig, as well as Bugs Bunny and the like. So, and The Night Before Christmas was done by Walt Disney Productions. So on yesterday's date, 90 years ago, Warner Brothers, Buddy's Showboat, and Walt Disney Productions, The Night Before Christmas, which was an adaptation of the poem, I believe, both premiered in movie theaters 90 years ago yesterday. So with that, moving on to next piece of niche history here. Moving on to today. First off, heading back 50 years ago today, on this date back in 1973, Bruno Sammartino would defeat Stan Stasiak for the WWF Heavyweight Championship. This would start his second reign, which would last for the next 4 years up until 1977. This would, of course, end the 9-day reign of Stan Stasiak, who was essentially, at the time, a transitional champion, so that you get the belt back onto Bruno. As back in this day, kayfabe was a lot more strictly enforced. You didn't really have faces facing off against each other. At the beginning of 73, of course, Pedro Morales had been the WWF Heavyweight Championship. And then when Sammartino came back to the WWF, rather than have him win the title from Morales dropped it to Stasiak on the first there, and then Stasiak would drop it to Sammartino 9 days later. So that happened 50 years ago today. A little bit of wrestling history for you guys there. Context and all that. Moving ahead to 2003, 20 years ago today. On this date, 20 years ago today, the 85th issue of Blade of the Immortal from Dark Horse, from their Dark Horse manga imprint, went on sale on this date back in 2003, 20 years ago today. Sold for $2.99. It was 32 pages. So on this date, 20 years ago today, 85th issue of Blade of the Immortal from Dark Horse Comics through their Dark Horse manga imprint went on sale on this date 20 years ago today. And finally, on this date 5 years ago today, original net animation, ONA, from the combined efforts of Toei Animation and Gonzo Studios, Saint Seiya Santia Show premiered on this date on Crunchyroll on this date 5 years ago today. So, Saint Seiya Santia Show premiered on this date 5 years ago today. Of course, it is off of the Saint Seiya series.
Yeah, Saint Seiya's pretty good.
Yeah. So that ONA, or original net animation premiered 5 years ago. So with that, before we head out, of course, I'm going to give you, I'm going to start with Metal. We're going to go counterclockwise because I didn't give Metal a chance to introduce himself. But if you want to do your outro, share any links, promote anything, go for it, Metal. Start with you, then Rick.
Yeah. On the Metal, I make a lot of stuff. I recently dropped a 16-page story called "The Bodacious Bikini Battle Babes of British Bay." It's pretty good, but I'm not even going to share that. I'm just going to tell you, buy my shirt because it's going to disappear in 5 days, and this is your only chance to get this design on merch. You don't have to get a shirt. You can be on a shot glass, mug, whatever. There's a bunch of different things. But
All right,
yeah.
there's the link right there. Hail Xenu and Xena from JR.
Hey, JR.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Metal, or are you good?
No, I'm good.
All right. Rick, you're up.
Well, I'm just going to share the link to my channel and say anybody who is watching who hasn't subscribed, please go subscribe and watch all my content that you can to try and build up my hours so I might be able to get myself monetized. It's going to take a while because I need 3,000 hours watched and I'm under 1,000. JR, I did get your email a couple weeks back or a week back, whatever it was when you sent it. You need to download the pictures and then re-upload them because just resending it to me did not give me those pictures.
All right.
So that's it.
Okay. Anything else, Rick?
Oh, I will be having, of course, my live stream on Tuesday, which will probably come with a update to my job situation.
All right.
Not how much of an update, but a little update.
All right. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We had some good comic talk there. A future programming note. I most likely am going to not have. Probably will not schedule the weekend edition on the 24th and a show on the 25th. Probably take those nights off just to give you guys a heads up on that. So
makes sense.
Yeah, I just figured I might as well because one also I'm not even sure I'm going to be home because you might be going to my older sister's
the 31st I might not be able to show up because I'm going to be out of town. I'll have my phone on me, but I don't know whether I'll have any sort of net. So.
Well, hopefully Metal and I and maybe we can get some other people to go in there. Also, of course, we'll be back here tomorrow night with, of course, back to doing Niche News and all that. Getting caught up on some of the newer stuff that's been going on. Also, this Friday, Rick, you'll be on with me as we will be continuing our look back to comics that went on sale in January of 1940. This week we'll be focusing on comics that went on sale from Archie Comics, or what was known then as MLJ Enterprises. Of course, one of the comics we'll be, introducing everybody to is Zip Comics #1. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope everybody will come check us out throughout the week. Let me get these last, I guess there were last couple. Will do, and then no problem. All right. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.